you got to realize that whatever you're doing, you're competing with somebody. What is it that gives you an advantage over your competition? Whatever you're good at, try to be great at it. And if you're great at it, good things will happen.
Maverick Podcast.
I'm far from average. That's why I had to come sit down and chop it up with DJ Maverick. They know my name from coast to coast and even in Dallas. I use my talent when I'm faced with a challenge. Gratitude strength is my magnet. Close your eyes and imagine. If you can see it in your mind, then you can have it.
Maverick Podcast.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us. This is the Maverick Podcast. I'm your host, DJ Maverick. Today we have the rock star in the building, the one and only finance bro. Daniel is back. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
I guess if we had to put it under an umbrella, what would you say that would be, like future trends or things that are coming? What would you describe it as?
I think there's stuff that we kind of see now that's happening, and I feel like stuff that's going to keep growing into 2025.
Okay.
That's the way I would describe it.
Yeah, we've got a big topic, which is Bitcoin. I don't know if you want to start off with Bitcoin or what?
Yeah, Bitcoin, if you've been under a rock, you probably know about Bitcoin now.
I feel like I've been talking about it forever. So I think any viewers out there, they definitely hear me talk about Bitcoin.
Yeah. If you noticed the old Maverick Podcast episodes, he had a Bitcoin like logo in the background.
Yeah, I had some wall art with the Bitcoin. I don't even know, like years ago, probably. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you did any research on Bitcoin just from seeing that, you're probably doing pretty well right now as well.
Yeah, so it finally broke 100K, which was like a big landmark, right? Everybody was waiting for that. It finally did it several times.
Yeah.
It's gone up and down, but it's staying pretty close to 100K now.
Yeah. I think it's around 94,000 right now. But yeah, it's ramped up a lot, especially after the election.
Yeah.
It went from 44, 45K, somewhere around there, to over 100K now. It's a little under that.
Yeah, I remember back in the day with El Salvador, right? With Bukele. Everybody thought he was crazy because he was like all in Bitcoin.
Right.
And there for a while, it was definitely kind of sketchy, right? If you were like from El Salvador, living in El Salvador, you're like, okay, this Bitcoin isn't doing too
the
hot.
country's money. Yeah. But now he's doing really well, and he does screenshots of, I don't know if you've seen that on Twitter. He'll post screenshots of like what the position looks like now.
Yeah.
Doing pretty good.
A lot of people, I guess, would compare it to gold. Is that how, like, if someone was like, hey, I don't know about this Bitcoin thing, describe it to me. How would you describe it?
That's how I would describe it. I would say it's like, if you want to break it down to like a basic level, it's like a store of value, basically. It's something that you can use to get out of the US dollar, like, or any currency. And you want to put, because the US dollar has been over the years losing money, like buying power, just because you can print more of it. The government can print infinite amounts of money if they need to, and that devalues the dollar. So if you don't want to lose buying power, because if you just have cash in your checking account and you're not keeping it at least earning interest somehow, then you're losing buying power over time with that. So some people, they got kind of upset with losing buying power. So Bitcoin came along, and this is a place where you can park money. And it's a store of value. And I would say it is kind of like a digital gold, just because I think that's how a lot of people view it. And there can only ever be 21 million mined coins. So it's like a fixed supply.
And I was reading that approximately 3 million of that is like lost, whether that be people's wallets, they don't remember the password or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So it's even less than that, it sounds like.
Yeah. So that's gone unless they can somehow break into the wallets. And even then, I think you get a certain amount of like attempts, and then you're locked out forever. It's kind of done. But it's it's part of the supply that's never going to get sold. So the way I view it now is like, at this point, it's kind of proven that it is like an asset, right? People are buying into it. It's been like 10 years since Bitcoin kind of became a thing. And now institutions are buying it.
Yeah, well, that's the interesting thing, right? Because before, a lot of the big banks and a lot of old school money was saying that Bitcoin wasn't a thing, like it shouldn't be trusted, but secretly they were buying it, right? Yep. So that was kind of interesting to see. Like if you were in the know, you could see like they were saying one thing, but then doing another, right? So now you've got ETFs, right? So how would you describe like an ETF to a person? They're not familiar with it. Describe like a Bitcoin ETF.
Right. So ETF is basically, I mean, if you have any type of retirement accounts or any investments, you're probably familiar with them. ETFs are stands for Exchange Traded Fund. And basically what that means is it's like a basket of stocks, basically.
Yeah.
Typically it's stocks. So like the S&P 500 is considered an ETF. Like the SPY is considered an ETF. It's a bunch of stocks that are bundled together in one vehicle where you can buy into that vehicle, and like you put $100 into it, and that $100 gets broken down into like, 10% Apple or, 5% this, and all across all the 500 companies, right? Depending on the weighting.
Yeah.
So that's what an ETF is. It just, something you can contribute to, and it's invested into a basket of stocks or an asset. Bitcoin ETF, basically institutions are buying Bitcoin, like whole coins, and keeping it in some type of custody. And they're buying a lot of it because they're institutions, they have a lot of money. And now they're letting people invest into it in their retirement accounts and brokerage accounts. But they created like an LLC or some type of vehicle that owns the Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And then that entity is traded. So you can buy into it. So now if you have an IRA, a 401k, and you want to hold it in your retirement, you can buy a Bitcoin ETF.
Which is interesting because even if you're like, hey, I don't trust this crypto thing, you may still have exposure just because where you have your money, they're doing it regardless of what you feel, right?
Yeah. A lot of it probably will be like equities, like stocks, S&P 500, maybe a little bit of fixed income like bonds, and like safer stuff like cash, mutual funds. And then like usually it would be gold, or like, like cash and gold would be like some of those smaller investments as well. And maybe alternative investments if you have access to that, like private equity. But typically it's like gold or like small commodities, which now I think people are going to start taking a little bit more of the allocation from gold and putting it into Bitcoin. Just because I think the younger generations they're not as excited about gold, as the older generation was. And I think they kind of view Bitcoin as like the digital gold, basically.
Yeah, it's definitely easy to carry around, right? If you have your wallet, you can take your Bitcoin. You can't necessarily take bars of gold everywhere with you, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
for sure.
There's been a lot of drivers that have fueled that 100K mark, right? So for sure, ETFs, I would say corporations would be another one, right? So corporations are almost holding it in their books like as an asset kind of thing, right?
Right. There's some big companies that are publicly traded, like MicroStrategies. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah, they're like going all in, right? Like they're like, I don't know, it's like set. Like we're just gonna keep buying and adding more Bitcoin, right?
The whole, I mean, the CEO Michael Saylor is just like, Bitcoin is worth more than the dollar long term. So his whole strategy is like, I have this publicly traded entity that I can use to raise cash, either by selling stock. They sell a lot of shares of stock, or they issue debt, but the debt isn't typical like a bond. They'll issue a bond. They'll raise all this money with debt, but they won't pay interest on it. It is just basically like they say, like over this period of time, we will take your money in the form of debt, but the way we repay it is we'll convert it to equity later on, and you'll own like more MSTR stock. And if you believe in Bitcoin, then the longer term, thesis plays out that MSTR will be worth more.
Yeah, it's interesting to see these corporations because like MicroStrategy is just like a SaaS company, right? Like they just basically like sell subscription to their software. Yeah. But it's almost like on top of that, you're also investing into Bitcoin now just because how much they're holding in Bitcoin.
Yeah, it became like, so I think back in the day, in the 90s probably, they were like a tech SaaS company. But I think they were on the verge of maybe going out of business, and I think it was even like sub-dollar at some point. But they completely pivoted to Bitcoin, and now they're basically like a vehicle to buy Bitcoin. Yeah, and like hodl it, and like keep accumulating it. I don't know how much they have right now, but I know they're like the biggest one that has the most Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think what happens sometimes is people hear crypto and they just think automatically it's a scam or it's too risky. But it's important to know that the different coins have different purposes. And I would say that Bitcoin isn't really used to like do transactions. It's more of like, we're just going to hold, right? It's like a reserve of value. So if you're buying Bitcoin over time, I don't think it's as dangerous as if like you're going to buy DOGE and hold it over time, right? So that's an important distinction, right? What would you describe that as? Like, there's like, I guess, just like a stock, right? There's
Right.
stocks that you want to hold long term
Right.
versus maybe a short term. You're going to get a gain here soon, right?
Right. Yeah. I would say so. There's definitely a lot of scams in crypto, as is in there's like any other industry, right? There's like scammy stuff. But Bitcoin, it's been proven. It's been around forever. People can't really manipulate it.
It's slow. If you want to do a transaction, just
Yeah.
like the processing power, it doesn't make sense to do it with Bitcoin.
Right. So it's more like a store value, like you said, like a digital gold, somewhere to park cash, basically. They came up with the Bitcoin Cash, which is like a fork
Yeah.
to Bitcoin, and that's a little bit better for transactions, but even that's not the best. So that's why all the other crypto like assets develop. So there's like Ethereum, there's Solana, there's a bunch of other stuff that you can transact in. That's a little better. It's faster and cheaper fees. Like Solana is pretty quick and cheaper fees, So like that's another way to transact crypto. So yeah, I mean, it's like, there's a lot of currencies in the world, right? There's the US dollar, there's gold, there's different things you can transact in. There's a lot of different crypto currencies or assets as well.
I think the other thing that's kind of fueled the rise of crypto, Bitcoin, is also the election, right? So the election results and especially Elon's involvement, that has brought a lot of interest to crypto as well. So there's like a force behind that as well, I would say.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely, you can notice it as well. Like I think Bitcoin was 44,000, somewhere around there before the election. And once the election kind of became clear where it was going to go, they knew the new administration was going to be friendlier towards crypto. I think Trump did a Bitcoin conference or something like that, basically, hyping up that they would be buying it as well. And there's been talks of like this Bitcoin strategic reserve.
Yeah, which that's interesting if that does happen, right?
Yeah. And it's like you said, El Salvador, right? They bought it. The government bought Bitcoin. The U.S. has some Bitcoin now, but they're not the leader. And I think like the U.S. dollar, like around the world, is like the reserve currency. So like it's like a lot of countries use the U.S. dollar to transact in. So I think if the U.S. wants to take it seriously, I think they're kind of leaning towards it now to have like a strategic reserve. I don't know if it's going to be $1 billion or more that they're going to buy, but they're planning on buying a lot of it. And that's kind of what's making people bullish on Bitcoin. Because they haven't started even buying that yet.
Yeah. So not financial advice for entertainment purposes only, but I am still a believer in Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And I think that if you're comfortable with like, of course, if you need the money or whatever, don't invest money that you need, right? But if you want to have
money that you need.
If you want to have some exposure to crypto, I would say Bitcoin is a great way to just kind of buy in over time. Right?
Yeah, you can buy in over time. There's the Bitcoin ETFs if you feel more comfortable with that as well. There's, a lot of them I'm not going to specifically name, because I don't want to give financial advice. But, you can look into them. A lot of big institutions have them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's the way I look at it again, it's like a fixed supply of coins that can never be like mined. They can't make more of them. Mathematically, it's like impossible the way it's kind of set up. And, a fixed supply, if you think of economics like 101, fixed supply plus like a lot of big buying demand from institutions and just like people around the world, different countries even buying Bitcoin, then that drives the price up naturally over time. And then if you have a big country like the US talking about a strategic reserve, buying more of it, then I think, and institutions buying more of it, I think it's kind of here to stay. It's kind of too big to fail at this point. Corporations as well buying it.
Everybody knows about Bitcoin, but if you think about it worldwide, I don't think that's the case. So I would say probably, I don't even know if like 1% of the whole world has Bitcoin or knows about Bitcoin. There's still a lot of people that haven't purchased any crypto, right?
Yeah, for sure. And then there's some people that, around the world in different countries where their currency's kind of been like, not as stable, like high inflation and just not the best currency that they started using Bitcoin and now they're doing a lot better. So I think, it's definitely global, but yeah, you're right. It's not a lot of the population still has kind of.
So it's crazy, normal. Right? Even if you think like, oh, it's at 100K, I'm too late, I'm not going to buy any. If you step back and think about the whole world as a whole, like a lot of people still don't hold any.
Yeah. And the other thing we were talking about earlier was, the older generation, there were a lot of gold bugs, right? They were called gold bugs that that was their asset that they bought, they held, they did well with gold. But then, there's a lot of younger generation that kind of maybe believes more in Bitcoin or crypto as the future.
Yeah.
and there's going to be a huge wealth transfer from the older generations to the younger generations. So I think that's going to probably push Bitcoin higher. The strategic reserve is going to push Bitcoin higher. And also just if you look at the market cap, like how much the approximate value is of like gold currently, you want to kind of use that as like a gauge. I think it's like 17.7 trillion, somewhere around there, market cap. And I think Bitcoin is like 1.8 trillion, something like that. So it's like, you know, it can still go up 10x more to match gold's current market cap. Like you could reasonably assume, if you believe it's going to become the new gold and overtake that potentially, then there's still room there. And the value of Bitcoin would be like around 900,000 if it matches the current market cap of gold. So not financial advice,
right?
But you know,
yeah, it's definitely becoming more mainstream. There's even credit cards that instead of cash back, you can set it to get crypto back. So you know, Gemini is one of the credit cards that does that. You can set it to just give me my rewards in Bitcoin or Ethereum or something. So definitely becoming more mainstream.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's definitely here to say. You're probably going to hear more of it, you know, in the coming year for sure.
Yeah. Next topic is DOGE, and I'm not talking about crypto, right? So DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency. We were talking before the pod. There's not really a motivation oftentimes with government agencies to be profitable because they don't have to, like a normal business, right?
Right.
So DOGE is going to come in and disrupt a lot of that, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of government jobs out there where they create departments, maybe in previous administrations. You know, it doesn't matter if it's Democratic, Republican. I think across the board, there's been, you know, just create a new department of this and that. And there's a lot of that stuff that just doesn't get audited and looked at later on. And then government's grown. Like this is like something that I learned in my economics class like 10 plus years ago. You know, it's just like, I forgot the term but there's a term for it that just government keeps growing and you got to keep paying for that. And the reason why that's important is because a reason for a lot of the inflation is because of government spending. Yeah. So like, doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on, party you're on, like it's hurting you, it's affecting you in a certain way. So I think it is a good thing to kind of audit some of this stuff and just see if we need it, because there might be stuff that we're paying for, have no idea about, and you know, some people are doing well with that personally, but over, you know, it adds up to stuff that kind of impacts the economy overall. Yeah,
spearheaded by Elon and Vivek.
Right.
And an interesting thing that I found out, I don't know a whole lot about Vivek, but he went to Harvard, and in Harvard, apparently he used to cover Eminem songs.
Oh, really?
And he was like doing like Eminem covers and stuff like that. Okay. Like he would go by the Vec. Like,
oh, wow.
Like that was like a random thing that I found out.
Okay.
You know? But apparently this whole DOGE, this whole department, if it's successful, the end goal would be that it's going to kind of dissolve.
It'll dissolve.
End,
yeah.
right?
I think it's like within 2 years. They're trying, it's not even the full term of the presidency. A lot of people are involved there that have egos. So, you know, that could maybe disband it even earlier. So we'll see how it turns out. But yeah, it's only supposed to be a year or two.
Yeah. Also, the other thing, I think there's going to be a lot of barriers, right? So they might have this ambitious goals, but, you know, for unions, for example, right? There's a lot of government unions. We're seeing that with Amazon. We're seeing that with Starbucks. A lot of unions where they're just like holding their ground and they're like, no, we're not going to, you know, change. So that's a great example of some of the barriers they're going to face.
Yeah. And I think you need both of that, right? You need the tug and pull, right? From both sides, the unions and then the people just making sure, you know, it's like proper use of funds, basically, like tax dollars. Because otherwise, you know, government keeps growing so much that they're going to keep raising taxes to pay for all this stuff. That hurts the everyday person, or just inflation is kind of taxation itself. Yeah, I think it does. You got to look at it. You would audit your own finances if you get out of control. Well, you know, so I think it's a good thing that we're kind of looking at it.
Yeah, 1,000%. I think the other thing that we're going to just continue to hear that I'm sure people might be tired of is AI.
Right.
Right. It just keeps advancing. The pace is faster and faster. I don't know. Have you used it more and more throughout your life? Yeah.
Yeah, I've used it a lot. I've heard, you know, students in school now and like high school, middle school, college, like they're all using AI, right? So it's like, it's normal to use AI. So by the time they get to the workforce, you know, in a few years, you're gonna stand out if you don't use AI, you know? So it's good to use it. I use it a lot. I use ChatGPT mainly.
It's interesting because a lot of people have like their favorite. There's all these different models, and then you hear people saying, well, I like ChatGPT, or I like Google's version or whatever, right? So kind of interesting to see that.
Yeah, I've used Grok too. I think Grok's gotten better as well. People are kind of saying it's kind of maybe overtaking ChatGPT potentially.
Have you noticed that you Google less and use more AI? Because I've noticed that with myself, where if I'm doing research or looking up something, like my first thought now is to use AI versus like before you'd be like, just Google it.
Right. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think I've done that a lot, and it's cool now because even that has like the ChatGPT is the one I mainly use. It has audio as well, so like even if you want to speak something and just you can press the audio and say like, I want to practice Portuguese or Mandarin for 30 minutes. Like, give me a lesson, and you can have a conversation back and forth, almost like you have a language tutor. Or it'll find information and just give you an answer right away within like a few seconds, as opposed to you have to do a Google search, see which one's the best link, and click through a bunch of different pages, right?
Yeah, a ton of startups too. So one of my favorites is Perplexity, right? So Perplexity, this app, it kind of gives you almost the best of both worlds because it's using AI, but then it's also citing the sources, right? Oftentimes when you use AI, like it'll give you this response back, but you don't really know where it's coming from. With Perplexity, it's almost like, okay, this is the answer, and it'll cite, so you can see like where it's pulling the information. Have you played with Perplexity?
I did, earlier. I think I just played with their model, but now I think you have access to like a bunch of the other AI models as well, right?
Yeah, it lets you pick whatever model you want to use. It's kind of a cool tool. I'd say for viewers out there, just start playing around with it. I mean, you don't really even have to have like a use case, just like start using it. Like you could use it for all kinds of things. Like if you got ingredients and you're like, hey, what can I make? Or hey, you can prompt it. So you can say, before you ask the question, you can say like, hey, you're a fitness expert. Like, these are my goals. What are your recommendations? So that's the cool thing too, is learning how to prompt it before you ask the questions.
Yeah. Prompts are big as well. You can say, I have an interview coming up, and like, help me prepare for the questions I might receive and like a second round interview, or this is like the job description, what are things they might look for, or you're like trying to create a recipe, like give me, I want to make the recipe from like this part of Italy, and like give me what are the freshest ingredients, or like what chef uses what ingredients, like if you want to kind of model the recipe after like a certain chef or something like that. So you can prompt it to be like, if you were this person, what advice would you give me? Yeah, as well. So you can use that as a consultant. You can use it as like a way to kind of give you like, if you know nothing about an industry and you're trying to learn topic, say, give me a crash course on this, and it'll just give you like a bunch of all the highlights and stuff, and you can keep prompting it even more after that. So I think, it's you could do a lot with it. Kind of think of it as like an advisor or a consultant.
Yeah, it's just like your assistant. And then the great thing right now is you can experiment with it. And if you don't like the results, you don't have to use it. Yeah. But you just get more comfortable with the technology and with the prompting, so you know what works best, right?
Yeah. And it's like, I mean, just think of it like you have a really smart friend, that you can talk to and ask questions. It'll give you back a lot of info, and you can decide to use it or not, but at least like you can get quick information, and the models are getting better over time as well.
Yeah, definitely. The other thing that's coming up, a lot of buzz behind that, is of course the robots, right? So we've seen, of course, the Tesla robots. There was like a big reveal with that. There were like bartenders and stuff like
Optimus,
that. Right. But before the pod, you were telling me you even saw a robot at the airport, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think you're going to start seeing more robots just in general in 2025, and they're definitely beyond that. I got off my flight at Will Rogers and saw this small little like robot. People were kind of walking around it. They didn't
think
notice
people are getting
there.
Comfortable? Like that's the thing that I wonder. Are people just going to get comfortable after a while? Like what were
eventually?
people's reactions?
Eventually it's going to turn into like iRobot. Where just you see robots walking around and the world's kind of futuristic, but hopefully it doesn't turn into the negative ending of iRobot. That's the thing we're trying to avoid. But there's the small little like cleaning robots now that are out, and I think you'll start seeing that more for sure in like airports, hospitals, and things like that. But then you're also getting the humanoids, like the human like robots like Optimus, Tesla, coming out as well. And I think they're pretty advanced now from what I'm seeing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you see a lot of companies are also experimenting, right?
Yep.
So you'd see food delivery, you see drone delivery,
Right.
right? There's going to be robots that fail. There's going to be use cases that don't make sense,
Yeah.
right? Like I often see where some of the food delivery, the robots will get stuck on the side of the street or they fall into a curb or whatever. So I think it's going to be something that's going to evolve over time.
Yeah, for sure.
But I just wonder, are people going to get comfortable with it? Are they going to be fearful of it? I don't know about that piece.
Probably a little bit of both. Probably a little fear initially, right? But then it becomes like the new normal, and it takes time to adjust. Yeah, it's weird to have a robot. Think of like you're gonna have a robot in your house, just doing stuff for you, right?
Yeah.
But that's probably something that's gonna happen in like 10 years.
What would be like the first task? Like, let's say you have a robot. What would be your first task? So you're like, I never want to do this ever again. My robot can do it for me.
Throw out the trash and clean the dishes.
Yeah,
for sure.
Dishes for sure. Right? Yeah.
Cut the lawn if you got a big lawn. You know, just like anything like that just takes up your time. I think is going to be useful. Maybe even like, I mean, you might have delivery for your groceries, but there might be also like go get groceries for me.
Yeah.
And then a lot of these the humanoids are becoming more advanced because they have AI now in them. So just think about like a advanced like robot that you can have it know how to cook really good food for you, and now you have like a personal chef at home, making your meals and stuff like that while you're doing your work.
And trust me, I know how crazy it sounds, right? Because you think about this and you're like, it's sci-fi, or it's like, but it's like the expense of these robots are just going to continue to go down,
Going to drop,
and they're going to continue to improve, right? So I think that it's not crazy to think about in the future where that might be just a normal thing.
It's crazy right now to think about it because we're in the early stages of it. But yeah, I think they're trying to get the price down. The Tesla, I think Optimus robot, they're trying to get that down to like $30,000, which sounds like a lot, but that's a price point where a lot of people could afford it. Some of the people, at least, it's kind of like a new car, And if you think of all the time it saves you and all these other things it can do for you, it might be worth it, but you'll for sure see like the enterprise application of it. Like hospitals might start using it if they have like they're low on staff, and they need care for patients, or delivering food, medications, things like that, right? I think
manufacturing, right? Like it's been around in manufacturing forever, especially in automotive. Right. They've been using robots forever, pretty much. Right.
They got some simple robots in a lot of manufacturing, and I've heard that they have even like the Tesla, like Optimus robots working on the assembly line now for Tesla as well, which is kind of crazy about as well. So I think, we're in the early stages. It's kind of crazy to think about, but I think you're going to start seeing more and more of them, whether that's drones, the small robots, and maybe eventually like the humanoids, you know. And with AI, they're becoming, before robotics was something that you kind of laughed at, they're like, oh yeah, sure, robots are going to be a thing, right, in the future. So we're self-driving cars and all these other things.
Yeah, if you think about that, that's a great example, right? If you would have told somebody, hey, you're going to be able to ride in a car, you're not going to have to steer. You're not.
It's like Back to the Future too. It's like you're seeing all the crazy stuff happening, but it's stuff's happening now.
The thing that's going to require all this to function is processing power, right? So the other thing that we were talking about is all these data centers and all the processing behind it, right? So what are your thoughts of just like the energy consumption of that and the requirements for all this? Yeah,
with the LLMs, like the ChatGPTs, Perplexities, all these different like AI language-based models, right? The chat AI, that takes a lot of processing power, and then also all these new applications for it. Whether that's like full self-driving, humanoids, whatever it is, right? And also cloud computing is necessary as well. All that takes like a big amount of computational power. So the way that's kind of being solved is with data centers. A lot more data centers are being invested in, built around the world. And they're also trying to make the energy power to I guess, be like the provider for the data centers to be clean. So the most efficient way they found is through nuclear, like nuclear power plants as well. So that's like the carbon-free way to kind of power a lot of the stuff that's efficient. And, nuclear might seem like a crazy thing as well, but I think the latest technology and nuclear it's pretty safe, it's clean. Like a lot of big countries like China as well, like they're advancing nuclear.
Yeah.
Because there's a need for a lot of this, like data centers, infrastructure building, computational power, all that stuff.
Yeah, because if you think of the traditional, right, there's solar, there's wind, there's geothermal, but I also think that there's going to be opportunities where maybe there's going to be a collab, right, where a traditional energy source might be able to use energy that they're not using and then repurpose that for some of these data centers, right? So I think in oil and gas, sometimes the thing that they do, they call it flaring, where for the gas, if it doesn't make sense to, ship it out in a truck just because of where commodity prices are. I don't know if you ever noticed where you're driving around and sometimes you just see a flame, right?
Oh yeah.
So that flame is just
that's flaring?
It's just excess gas, right? And to me, like that might be a potential opportunity where that flaring, instead of just letting it flare because it doesn't make sense from an economical standpoint, maybe that could be a potential collab for whether that be like maybe Bitcoin mining or a data center or something. I think that could get interesting where you see these traditional things that might be a potential energy source because it's just kind of wasted right now.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I think that's definitely, there's like, there's baby steps to, get like anytime there's a new thing, you got to pivot over to like clean energy. I think we try to go full on clean energy and there needs to be like a gradual, step over to that process. I feel like that makes a lot of sense what you're saying. Even in cars, there's like hybrid vehicles as well, right?
Yeah.
Clean energy still uses gas.
Yeah. And I think the infrastructure is just going to continue to improve. We were talking too that with electric vehicles, the shift kind of happened really quickly where a lot of people were previously on board electric is the future. And now you're starting to see some of that, roll back a little bit.
Yep.
So it's interesting to see just how innovation and how the infrastructure is going to really determine what's the future. Is it going to be electric cars? What is it that's going to drive that, right? So a lot of changes in all the industries. It's just change.
A lot of change. Yeah, it's an exciting time to be alive, So it's like it's a lot of changes, but I think just kind of keep your eyes peeled, see what's happening, be kind of open to it. There was a lot of big changes, like the internet was a big thing, like the assembly line was a big thing. Like there's been pivots like that. Social media was a big thing. This is another big thing in AI and clean energy, and these are like ones that have like great big global scale changes across different industries. So I think it's exciting and also something to kind of like keep your eye out because it's going to impact you one way or another.
Yeah, historically, I would say the human species, the first instinct is to be fearful, right? So
always,
new technology is coming up, and it's like fear is like the first instinct, right?
Yeah.
So that happened probably with radio, with television,
right?
Internet for sure, right? So now AI, some of these new technologies,
the
you kind of
computer,
see the same, right?
Yeah, people used to do. We were talking about this. It's like people used to do accounting by hand, right? And then the computers came around, and now it's like it's a new technology, and you got to keep up with it. Or even like Y2K, the internet, like it was like that was like a whole thing where people were scared, but went past that, and then e-commerce became like a huge thing, like having a store online, like instead of just like a brick and mortar shop.
Yeah,
like that's stuff. It's always initially scary, but then it becomes the norm eventually.
Yeah, 1,000%. I don't know what would be your advice for someone that says, I'm not good with computers or I hate computers, right? Like, what do you say to that person?
Well, when you were a kid, you probably were open to all these different technology, whatever the latest technology was, right? You were like keeping up with it. And maybe it was your parents that were like, I don't understand this, right? Well, just like you're going to get older. And I think you want to keep up with the technology just because if you don't, you're going to become like your parents. And not that there's anything wrong with that either, but it's just like you don't want to be falling behind.
Yeah, you just want to be able to evolve. And like I said, even
understand what's going on.
If you don't use it on a day-to-day or it's not required for your job or whatever, it's always great to have exposure and have knowledge and know how to do some of these things and use these tools because at the end of the day, why not, right? Like it's just going to make you a more well-rounded person, I think.
Right. Yeah. And it's something that's going to impact you. But I think if you're you're not afraid to try it. Even like the Chat GPT, right? Go from Googling to like Chat GPT, like, or just one of these LLM models, like just use that as like a starting point. Like that's an easy shift, and then you'll see the value in it.
Yeah.
So, you'll see other stuff kind of pop up, and just be open to it, because it's stuff that can be initially scary, but, so was going from the BlackBerry to the iPhone, like touchscreen phone. So I think it's just technology evolves, it keeps moving. You got to kind of keep up with the times.
Yeah. And I think AI, I'm seeing it everywhere, really, like even in photography, in video, a lot of the creative stuff. There's even AI influencers now. So I think it's just going to disrupt basically every industry, if you think about it, eventually. So I think just be comfortable with the tools. Just play around with the tools at the end of the day.
There's AI given therapy. There's AI that like you said, video, like, it can help you. Like if you get writer's block and you're a writer, it can help you with that. Create songs, whatever it is, right? Design a website.
Yeah.
It's, it can do a lot for you. Help you be your tutor. So just be open to it, I feel like.
Yeah, definitely. Let's talk about music, something completely different. So music for sure is getting impacted by AI, but just at a personal level, what was like your favorite album of 2024?
Yeah, I really like Raul Alejandro, like his new album, just because I feel like, I've followed all his other albums too, and I think he's been a really good artist that's been kind of like growing in popularity over time, has had a good amount of hits. But I like this latest album because he like kind of did like more salsa too, which people like were like, oh, salsa is not really being looked at as much, or there's not as much like focus on it as much anymore, unless you were kind of like really listening to salsa and like in those communities. But I feel like he kind of shined a spotlight to that with the song like Tu Con Él, the Frankie Ruiz,
which is
remake,
a cover, cool. Right?
Cover,
so, and then even I didn't know. So Frankie Ruiz's was a cover of another guy. Yeah. So it started off as like a balada. It was a slow song. Yeah. And then Frankie Ruiz made it into a salsa. Right. And now Raul, he did his version. Right. Which to do a cover of that song, that's like a historic song. Right? Yeah. So
you got to do it right.
You got to do it right for sure. Yeah. I didn't know that he was like that good of a singer because he was doing reggaeton. He was doing more pop stuff. Right. Right. And now that he's doing more traditional salsa, then you can really tell like, okay, can you sing or not?
Right. That's a true test for sure. Yeah. And I think people responded well to it. And even people that were like, that listened to salsa a lot, like the older stuff, they were like, oh, this is like a great cover. So I think it's just bringing a spotlight to that, which I think is always good.
Yeah. And even in the live performances, he's doing a great job with that song specifically. You can tell that he's doing it justice, right? Like he's actually like able to sing it, perform it live. Because it's one thing to do it in the studio when you have all the tools, all the editing, you have auto-tune, all this, right? But then to do it live, that's something completely different.
That's a real test for sure. Yeah. Yeah, that's you'll see it with some artists, they'll stumble live, right? Yeah. But the studio, you can get auto-tune and fix it up.
Everybody's gonna say Kendrick is the greatest album for sure. It's solid. A good year. Yeah. Great year, right? And he's gonna do the Super Bowl, right? Everything, right? So definitely shout out to Kendrick, the GOAT. But for me personally, I think Tyler, the Creator, had a great album, right? So his newest album, I think, just because on a creative level, he's trying new things, and you can't really say that like he's just hip hop now. Yeah. So if you listen to his new album, just he's experimenting with all kinds of stuff, all kinds of genres, and to me, I really enjoyed it just because it's different.
What's some of the songs?
Man, I think for me, Noid and Ratata were some of my favorite songs on there. But the whole project, that's the other thing. Like, it's a whole concept. So even with like the cover art, right? I think it's like a whole concept. He gets into character. Like every album, like Flower Boy, every album that he's done, it's like a whole concept. I really miss that because now in the age of like singles and streaming, everybody's just like one song, right? And I miss the whole, like, this is a concept. This is
whole
like
presentation.
A whole piece of art together. Right. And then you listen to everything as a project as a whole.
Yeah.
So
like track, does it kind of flow like track by track as well? Like
definitely. And then
cool.
the instruments, the production, super unique. It sounds like really big if you listen to it in a good sound system.
Okay.
Man, it sounds amazing.
I gotta listen to it
Yeah.
again. I listened to just a few of the songs, but I gotta play it through.
Yeah, definitely. Tyler Cornucopia is the name of the album, but even his past albums, I think he always does a great job getting into character.
Yeah.
The artwork, like as soon as you see it, it's like, okay, this is going to be something different. So
Cool. I
for
love
me,
that. Yeah.
I think that was cool. Everybody's going to say Kendrick. And,
Right.
and I love the Kendrick album for sure.
They Not Like Us is like the single of the year,
Everywhere,
right? It
right?
played everywhere for sure. And
Yeah.
Super Bowl, it's gonna play again
Yeah,
for sure.
definitely. But I mean, those were some of the topics that we wanted to talk about. We kind of wanted to keep it a little bit short.
Yeah.
And just some of the stuff that we've been talking about. It's almost like this is like a preview of like what our group chat is like.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we have a group chat and we're always talking about stuff that we're seeing in the news, trends, technology,
Stuff that's gonna keep
finance.
growing in the next year as well, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like happening now and getting
Yeah.
bigger.
Yeah, viewers
Sure.
are probably like, what the heck is in your group chat? Like you guys are talking about Bitcoin
Yeah,
and robots
robots.
and Tyler the Creator.
Yeah, it's a
and
good
Raul
group chat.
Alejandro.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's the best group chat. You know,
Yeah.
you have a mix of everything.
Yeah, definitely. I want to thank you for your time. We're
For sure.
doing it here.
Yeah.
It's always fun. Like I always tell you, like I wish you lived closer. We could just do this all the time, right?
It makes it more special. You know, every time I can come in
Yeah.
a little bit more, and I like the new setup as well.
Yeah.
Looks great.
Thank you.
You're in a good studio now. Shout out to the producer as well.
Yeah,
Doing
shout
a
out.
great job.
He's killing it.
I know, behind the scenes, and yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, there you have it. Ladies and gentlemen, the super talented finance bro, Daniel, in the house on the Maverick Podcast.
Thank you all. By the way, hit like and subscribe
Definitely.
if you made it through this episode, and also happy early 2025 to you all.
I want to start doing like if you made it this far, drop an emoji. So what's your favorite emoji? We can tell people if you made it this far, drop this emoji. What's
I
your
like
favorite?
the salute.
The
emoji.
salute?
Yeah.
Okay.
Salute's the best one. So
Perfect.
drop the salute emoji if you want to have a great 2025 in the comments.
All right, I like that. Awesome. I think I'm gonna start doing that just to see like who makes it to
Yeah.
the end.
There might
Like-
be a special thing afterwards, maybe.
Yeah,
You never know.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, another episode of the Maverick Podcast. In dreams, we trust.